People have been living here in Big Bend Ranch State Park for over 11,000 years, before it was even a park. I think, we live in a very digital age, lots of modern amenities. And so out here in the park, it really feels that, it feels like you're traveling into the past, getting a glimpse into history. A lot of folks don't know about Big Bend Ranch State Park. We're way out here in the middle of nowhere, so for a lot of people that may be scary, but I think it just makes you feel like you're part of a much bigger story.
The things you can find in this park are solitude, it's really remote, it's more rugged, it's less curated. There are lots of different plants and animals, a lot of different natural habitats that you can see. We focus a lot on preservation, preserving the past, and we do that for people currently and in the future to learn about our history, because we can learn a lot about history based on what other people have done. There's a lot of history in the park that happened before the Spanish got here, before people from Europe came through the area and started writing their version of history.
Welcome to Big Bend Ranch State Park. Our park is 315,000 acres, making us the largest state park here in Texas. If you want the size comparison, we're roughly the size of Los Angeles. We're located here in the Chihuahuan Desert, which is the largest desert in North America and one of the most biodiverse. Here at Big Bend Ranch State Park, you can choose your own adventure. I recommend checking out this scenic drive right here behind us. National Geographic considers it one of the most scenic drives in the country. Stop by Hoodoo's Closed Canyon for 2 great hikes. Then you can take a trek into the interior to Cinco Tinajas and explore pictographs, which tell over 11,000 years of history here in the Big Bend. And to end your trip, stop by Fort Leaton State Historic Site, which is an old adobe trading post from the 1800s. And of course, you cannot forget our beautiful Rio Grande River. Right here's the US, and there's Mexico.
You'll see up here, we have some really brilliant colored soils and rocks out here. And the rain just helps amplify that, especially with the cloud cover. And it just makes everything a little more moody, which is a very unique feeling out here. We don't really get that feeling of fall necessarily, but it kind of adds to the ambiance with the clouds and all that. We are at the Hoodoo's Trail at Big Bend Ranch State Park. It is one of our most popular trails along FM 170. It's a mile loop, and as you can see around us, you can see why people want to come here and check it out. There's some really incredible geology happening right here.
Hoodoo, that word originates from Africa, and they believe that spirits were actually held in these hoodoo formations. But this type of rock is igneous volcanic rock, and we have here in the park, it's going to be volcanic tuft. So from when the volcano erupted and the ash kind of settled down, that rock was compressed down into sedimentary rock, and so it erodes. It's very fragile rock. It's pretty, weak. And so the way it's eroded, it makes this cool, unique formation.
So a formation like this, this very large hoodoo, it kind of has this very irregular, groovy shape. It kind of looks like a mushroom a little bit with that flatter top, kind of a collar around it, and then a more bulbous bottom. So over time, wind and rain have hit this and weathered it, but this unique colored shape falls off the top of it, and it hooks inward, kind of like
An umbrella.
Yeah. And it trickles inside and then sluices off the side, and it creates all this deposition that you can see around us, all of this finer gravel, even these larger chunks that have fallen off of this large piece. Those all play into how these hoodoos were formed.
And eventually this rock could be carried off and turned into a different type of rock. So the rock cycle, rocks are constantly recycling themselves and turning into different rock.
Yeah, this conglomerate rock is a really good way to show that. This is a rock made up of other rocks. These are rocks that were trapped in different type of sediment, compressed really, really hard, but not so hard that they became hot enough to fuse. Right. So you can see this piece, this chunk of rock has all kinds of different types of rock in it. And you can see it's still eroding. You can see the looser sediment that we have on the ground that's falling down kind of all around. It's creating looser spots. That is coming from the sedimentary rock all the time. So it's ever evolving here.
Yeah, you can really, out here in the park, see how nature takes front stage. You're really at the mercy of the elements often, and so it's really unique to see how the natural world interacts, and you see it in the raw here in the park. Yeah.
We've collected a little bit of a variety pack of different rocks that we can find just on the ground right here. We didn't go very far to find these. All different types of shapes and sizes. They're different textures.
Different colors too.
Different colors, yeah. This one's rougher. It's obviously the biggest that we have in our hands right now. And it's flaking apart a little bit as I touch it, which is a really interesting property of that type of conglomerate rock. Whereas this one's smooth, and even if I squeeze it really, really hard, it's not falling apart, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I also have some super cool rocks.
Yeah, tell me about them.
Yeah, so this one here has kind of a green tinge, and that's unique. So maybe this is chlorite oxidizing with this rock. Yeah. And then this is another rock. My rocks are all hard. Mine aren't flaking.
Not flaking?
No.
They're all solid?
This one's solid and has some cool purple and orange bands, maybe maroon. And then, yeah.
Yeah, you can even see the different bands in it, which can be formed in multiple ways, based on the different minerals that are in those layers, based on how much pressure was on it at the time, how hot it got, if it was pressurized enough to change its temperature. That could all affect the color and the texture of all of these rocks.
This one's more red. I call it Mars red.
Mars red, yeah.
Four major North American geological events converge in our park. So around 500 million years ago, all of the park was underwater. So a lot of our soil is Cretaceous seafloor. And so that first major event is what we call the Ouachita Appalachian Uplift. So the event that created the Appalachian Mountains, you can still see remnants here in the park. Then, about 200 million years after that, we get the Rocky Mountain Uplift. So what happened there is the Pacific Plate subducted under the North American Plate, and that put a pressure which caused sediment to uplift into mountains. Then, from about 47 million years to 18 million years ago, we have event number 3, which is the Trans-Pecos volcanic field. When you see darker rock in the park, the mountains right behind me, those are the Bofacio's Mountains, and so those were all formed by volcanic activity. And then number 4 is the Basin and Ranges Trend. So that pressure we were talking about, the Pacific Plate dipping under the North American Plate, that pressure is released and our continent begins to spread out. And along here, such as the river behind us, fault lines create a crack in the earth that allow water to carve through the landscape. So we're here right on the banks of the Rio Grande, beautiful Rio Grande River. So the Rio Grande is on a long 1,800-mile journey. It starts way up in the Rockies, high in nice aspen, fir forest, and then it's traveling south here. It makes a big bend hence why it's called Big Bend Ranch State Park. The river makes a big bend.
Yeah, right around the bottom of Texas.
Exactly. And it not only, yeah, bottom of Texas, this serves as the southern boundary of our park, but it also serves as an international boundary. So on that journey, it ends up pouring out. The mouth of it is into the Gulf of Mexico. And so what's going on with our river? It's not very grand anymore, and that's due to several factors. Over 75 to 80% of the Rio Grande is siphoned off for agricultural uses. So we definitely need fruits, veggies, but also being mindful of how we're using our resources. We no longer get snow melt here. A third of all of our flow comes from the Rio Conchos, just about 7 miles upstream. As the river is getting smaller and smaller, invasive cane moves in, sediment's not able to be carried downstream. So there's a lot of different factors that are making it not quite as grand as it used to, but it's still a really beautiful view.
Yeah, and something I notice out here, there are a couple different spots in our park where the temperature changes drastically. One of those being when you're in higher elevations, kind of in the more remote parts of our park, but also when you're next to the river, there's more vegetation and the temperature drops quite a bit. So it's no wonder why people have been living out here for so long when you can stay much cooler right next to the river.
Speaking of vegetation, so riparian ecosystems are able to support larger trees, so mesquite, those cottonwood trees. And so this is a critical corridor for our migratory birds here in the park.
Yeah, it makes for some really nice birding. The river affects us, we affect the river. It's truly a give and take with our relationship with the river, ever evolving, especially when we're trying to encourage recreation and tourism in the area. The droughts and the floods out here affect our animals in very unique ways. When there's a drought or when the river is low, when the natural springs in our park have dried up, we have a lot more bear sightings and a lot more mountain lion sightings. They're searching for water in any way they can, and sometimes they're willing to risk coming across a human to get that water.
Another way also to look at some of these large-scale floods, it's also somewhat good for its channel resetting. Yeah. So all this sediment we have that's compacted here and is just hanging out, that large rushing water is going to carry it downstream into the Gulf, and so that the channel is wider and our river has more room to breathe.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of nutrients with it as well. I mean, this water is moving nutrients as we speak, but taking ones that are kind of more fixed in the environment and moving those other places is very helpful as well.
Yeah, the food web, everything is really interconnected here in the park.
Yeah.
They rely on one another, and so when there's a shortage somewhere, it has a ripple effect. But animals, I mean, there's always that sense of, adaptability and figuring it out.
That kind of biodiversity is so invaluable, and that's part of why we do what we do, to share information like that, and hopefully other people will get energized to protect it along with us.
Something I feel we need to work on conserving is protecting the future health of the Rio Grande. I feel really passionately about the water we have on this planet is all we're ever going to get, and so a lot of the river goes straight up into water vapor. And so trying to find a sustainable way where sediment can move downstream, so removing some of those invasive species, just trying to work with local communities on how we can work together to protect the river. I think that's going to be a really collaborative, even international partnership. I'm very passionate about protecting the river, and there's not a clear answer right now. So that's something we're going to have to work on and figure out. We're here at Closed Canyon. Now this canyon has nice tall 150 feet walls and is home to a wide range of flora and fauna that you might not see elsewhere in the park. Closed Canyon was formed millions of years ago. So if you've seen Moana, you know that volcanoes are very explosive. Here in the Trans-Pecos at Big Bend Ranch State Park, our volcanoes were extremely explosive, depositing large chunks of rock. Then over time, that rock is compressed down, and then water comes rushing down from the highlands of our park and carves a little slot, forming Closed Canyon. So we're here on the canyon floor, and you'll notice not a lot of sunlight reaches down here, and it's about 10 degrees cooler, creating a very unique microenvironment. And so our plants are competing. They're competing for abiotic factors, which are going to be air, sunlight, and water, in order to create food, which is a biotic factor. And so how do they do this? So a lot of our plants will have a much larger canopy, larger leaves, which allow them to catch more sunlight. Also, you'll notice in the canyon, we have more plants growing at the top, and that's because they have easier access to sunlight. The walls are volcanic igneous rock, and so oftentimes we also see slivers of quartzite, and then on the bottom of the canyon floor, we have different types of sediment that come through. And then high up on the canyon walls, there are different layers that have compressed down and form metamorphic rock. So if we notice, the canyon floor is very smooth. And so during flooding events, this flash floods. So we're getting rushing water, pushing through, moving sediment. And so sediment is constantly changing in here. In response to that, a lot of our plants, they're not living on the canyon floor. The only type that are really living on the canyon floor are grasses, which are able to bend with moving water. A lot of our plants, like these back here, are in cracks on the side of the canyon. And so what they do, a special adaptation is, they have a very shallow root system, but then those roots spread out so they're able to catch more water as we get these larger flooding events. So it's pretty unique and crazy that plants can live in cracks, right? On nice big volcanic walls. What happens is not only is weathering and erosion bringing in sediment on the canyon floor, but it also brings in soil, enriched nutrients as well. And so those roots are able to take hold, very shallow, and then they'll spread out in the interior of the canyon walls where they can collect water. So it's that soil in the cracks that allows plants to thrive here in the canyon. So as we were hiking in the park, we discovered a little hidden gem. So many plants here have special behavioral and physiological adaptations. And so that plant that we found today is a resurrection fern. So right here we'll notice that this fern is all shriveled up, and that's because it hasn't gotten moisture. So this special adaptation it reacts to the environment. So in this canyon wall, as soon as runoff comes off, these plants will then bloom this beautiful green color and spring to life. So that's the physiological adaptation, and also behavioral because it's reacting to the natural world around it. So this is a black spine prickly pear, and we're going to look at some different adaptations that this plant has acquired and that it's also inherited. So an inherited trait is the color of this prickly pear. So this is a special adaptation. When it's drier, there's not a lot of moisture in the soil, it's going to turn purple, and that's a stress indicator that it's wanting more water. And then we notice it looks like something has nibbled on this prickly pear, and so that's an acquired trait. This is something the plant had not genetically received, it was acquired. This is a seed pod that came from a yucca bloom. And so in here is the next generation of yuccas. And so the wind, pollinators will carry this throughout the park. And so here we have seeds like this. And so they'll take root here in the ground in the park, and then they'll turn from a little sapling up to this nice large yucca. And then once it gets enough energy, it will grow a stalk and bloom beautiful white flowers.
So we have a really interesting blend of natural resources, so plants, animals, rocks, geology, mountains, rivers. But we also have a lot of cultural history. We have a lot of native history, and we have a lot of ranching history as well. The land itself, throughout its history, was used for industrial ranching. It was originally over a dozen ranch properties. And throughout the years, those kind of all melded under a couple different owners. And then the state acquired the property and made it into a piece of public land protected by the state of Texas. And then in 2009, it was opened as a state park. So all things considered, we're a pretty young park, but we have thousands of years of history on this land. And the historic site itself, built in 1848, by Ben Leighton and his family, has been a trading post rather than a military installation in the area. And this fortress helped protect against raids from various different warring groups. Part of our efforts to preserve the past here is working with the adobe structures that we have in the park. Fort Leighton State Historical Site is the largest adobe structure in the state. It's a mixture of clay, sand, water, and grass, and we also use some manure in our recipe as well. And over time that hardens and it dries and it becomes this really, really strong structure. So that's what the fort is made out of, and it's crumbling. It's a natural material, it's gonna fall apart. But our rangers here today are learning as much as they can, and we found the ratio, again, our good recipe to rebuild and restore a lot of the pieces of the fort that have crumbled throughout time. So we like to preserve spaces like Fort Leighton State Historical Site, which was built in the 1800s, so it's after that. But a lot of the ways of life of the native people are also preserved at this site. It's a blast into the past, it really, really is. And hopefully the restoration and the preservation we're doing today to help hold together this place will be here to last. Because of the harsh sunlight in the Chihuahuan Desert, water is the most precious abiotic resource. Thankfully, our park has a lot of natural springs, and it creates oases like this. It has its own unique habitats, a plethora of different plants and animals, even its own unique temperature ranges. Even in the desert, we have trees here in oases, like this cottonwood, who has much broader leaves. They grow way above the underbrush so that they can get as much sunlight as possible, and they use the good surface area of their leaves to do that. Because of the different root systems that plants in the oasis have, it also has different soils. You can see here that this mound of dirt is much darker than the soils in other parts of the park, and it's held together by these root systems. This is a great example that even though this tree is dead, it's still providing nutrients to the grand life cycle. These mushrooms are feeding off of it as it decays, and then all those nutrients are going to go back into the soil and help more seeds become seedlings, and then so on and so forth. After a bit of scrambling over boulders, we have made it to Ojito Adendro Spring, and it has this beautiful pool of water and this trickling spring, natural spring that comes down the rock walls and feeds this hanging garden of ferns. The ferns cling onto the rock and get their water that way. A lot of animals come to this oasis to relax, drink water. There is a vibrant community of berries and a variety of fruits that they can eat. Our small oaks one day will provide acorns, which our bears love to eat. Even our smallest residents here at Big Bend Ranch State Park come here to drink. We've seen a variety of bees and wasps coming here, and they don't always want to go to the big pool of water to drink because that, puts them at risk of a predator coming up and grabbing them from the shore. Some of them go to the very bottom of this wall and we'll just land on a leaf that has water sitting on top of it, and we'll take a drink that way. We are sat at Las Cuevas, an over 60-acre site that has evidence of people staying at this spot seasonally for over 3,000 years. So here we have pictographs. You may have also heard the word petroglyph. A pictograph is an image that is painted or drawn onto a surface, whereas petroglyphs are carved into a surface. These are pictographs. They are created from red pigment that is sourced from local materials. They have left behind mortars, which are spaces in the rock that they have used to grind up different types of food, which gives us evidence that they were using agriculture. It's not hard to imagine on flat rocks like this that families would gather around preparing their meals together, sitting around a campfire, telling their own stories, creating art, just like we do today. This site not only has natural rock shelters and great materials for preparing different types of foods, but it's also really nearby a water source. There's a spring nearby, less than half a mile away, that would make this a perfect spot to spend time. Because of its abundance of resources necessary for sustaining life, this area also has a lot of human impact. We see that with the mortar holes, but we also see it with vandalism. Individuals have taken it upon themselves to try and chip out some of the pictographs that were left behind thousands of years ago in an attempt to make money off of them. Unfortunately for them, the rock is really fragile, so when they're chipping it out, oftentimes it breaks, and it's just a loss for everybody involved. When we're talking about archaeology and talking about preserving certain sites and preserving history, we're looking at it like a giant puzzle. When people take away pieces of those puzzles, whether that's taking away rocks, artifacts, pictographs, taking a token for themselves, they're taking away that piece for archaeologists and future people to be able to learn more about the history of the area.
So we're here at the Barton Warnock Visitor Center in our desert garden. And just some fun facts about the Barton Warnock Visitor Center. It is named after a prolific botanist who cataloged most of the plants here in the Big Bend. So to honor his legacy, we named the Visitor Center after him.
Yeah, he's got quite a few plant species named after him as well. So if you're leafing through some of our checklist booklets, you'll see his name pop up quite frequently as well. This desert garden does a really good job of highlighting a lot of the plants in the park. Of course, it's not all of them, but it's a really good representation of the diversity that you can see. We've got stuff that grows in more riparian zones. We've got stuff that grows...
We have a juniper tree that grows high up in the mountainous regions, higher elevation.
Things that you can only find on certain cliff sides, sometimes only certain times of the year.
Certain soil types.
Yeah, so this desert garden gives people
a glimpse.
And if people don't have time to see the rest of the park, because we are very large, this desert garden gives them opportunity to kind of get a little taste of what Big Bend Ranch has to offer biodiversity-wise.
So the Chihuahuan Desert, like most deserts, is a place of extremes. So many of our plants have special adaptations to conserve water, to get more water. And so one of those first plants we're going to talk about is a Palo Verde or a Ratama. And so Palo Verdes, you'll notice, so they'll drop their leaves when it's especially warm in here in the park. We get temperatures up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So they'll drop their leaves. The outer bark of the branches will shed. And so that green pigment you're seeing on the bark, that's chlorophyll. It will conduct photosynthesis actually through the branch.
Over here we have a desert willow. It's a very unique plant that we see next to larger water sources. And it has a lot of leaves on it, but they're really thin and they're very long, comparatively, compared to a lot of the leaves that we have out here. And they are that shape to conserve water. So the less surface area a leaf has, the less water can escape it. Think about oak trees, sycamore trees, those big leaves. We don't really have those out here. A lot of our plants choose to have much smaller leaves to conserve their water.
This is my favorite plant we have here in the desert. This one right here, which kind of looks puny right now, but this is called leather stem or sangre de drago, which is dragon's blood. And it's actually called, it gets the name because the root system, when you cut it open, the yellow sap will oxidize and turn red like blood. And it also will drop its leaves, like it already has, to conserve energy. And it actually will kind of go into kind of a slumber, and not a lot of metabolic processes are going to be going on in the plant right now.
Sometimes plants will, to protect themselves, will modify their leaves. A lot of plants out here have thorns and spines and all kinds of different things that prevent us from wanting to touch it, as well as animals that are trying to eat it. Just try and give it an extra leg up in the competition.
Animals have also learned to adapt this plant. So it's spiky, so it's going to keep predator species out. So our cottontail, our desert cottontail rabbits, they will burrow oftentimes in larger lote bushes so that coyotes can't chase after them.
Yeah, they'll put the entrance to their ren in a spot that something larger than them can't get in without getting poked.
So this next plant we're going to look at is creosote. So we'll head this way. And so creosote really dominates our landscape here in Big Bend Ranch State Park. So it makes a nice smell after it rains. And so that's an acid that this plant produces to protect itself from animals. So animals, oftentimes this will irritate their stomach lining, so that's a special adaptation this plant has. It also has an extensive root system. So underground it's taking up lots of space, and with that space it reaches and is looking for more water. It oftentimes takes up other water resources from other plants here in the park.
This is a plant you will see all over the park, all over the region, and all over Texas. This is a mesquite plant. Once again, we have quite small leaves, and this one is also very spiny. It has spikes on it to protect it from being eaten. It does produce mesquite beans. They look like really cylindrical legumes, and they are edible for humans and other animals. So this is a very popular tree. This is a very significant tree in a lot of our ecosystem niches within the park, and they're very successful. These plants can kind of adapt to their environment in really cool ways. They can become a really big tree if the space allows for it, or they can stay little and be ground cover. So they can take a lot of different forms, and that's a really wonderful adaptation for living out here, because when they reproduce, when they find a new spot to live, they don't really know what they're getting until they start growing and they find what they can transform into.
The desert is often thought of as a barren, desolate, uninhabited place, but we hope today that we showcased the wide diversity and adaptations that our desert plants have that allows them to thrive and survive. Here in Big Bend Ranch State Park, the Chihuahuan Desert is one of the most biodiverse deserts in North America.
I was even surprised when I came out here for the first time how much life there is, like, per square foot on the ground out here. It completely blew out my expectations of what I thought a desert was.
When visitors visit the park, they're always shocked because when you hear the word desert, you think desolate, uninhabited. But here, as we looked at today, Big Bend Ranch State Park has a wide variety of plants blooming with life. We like to say there's an adventure for everyone here in the park. We offer mountain biking, horseback riding, river rafting, and of course, one of my favorite parts is stargazing. Most of the population lives in urban areas where they can't see the Milky Way. A unique experience we preserve here in the park is you get to see the Milky Way. And you can connect to the night sky, which people have been seeing for thousands of years.
Big Bend Ranch State Park is an international dark sky park. What that means is the International Dark Sky Association, or IDA, has given us a list of parameters to meet, stating that we have very little light pollution. We have very little artificial light going into the skies. With our naked eye, we are able to see the Milky Way and several planets.
Now we're going to tell you how a telescope works. So light is either created or reflected off of a celestial body. That light is then sent through down to a mirror in our telescope. From there, the mirror reflects that light into a lens. The lens is then going to refract the light into the eyepiece, where you can see the celestial body with much more detail.
With our unaided eye, we're able to see that planets like Jupiter are in our night sky. But with a telescope, we can see things like all of the moons orbiting it and the red spot, which is a giant storm on the planet.
Our home, the Milky Way galaxy, is a spiral galaxy, and our solar system is located on the Orion Spur. And our nearest neighbor, our nearest galactic neighbor, is going to be the Andromeda galaxy, which is also a spiral galaxy. And it is located about 2.1 million light years away. We here are home in the solar system, and we revolve around the sun. The sun has a large gravitational pull, keeping all of the planets in our solar system in orbit around it. For every star we see, there are 20 million we don't see, but they all have a similar life cycle. So, how they begin is gas and rock, kind of floating through space. We call this interstellar medium. Then over time, gravity works to pull these clumps of rock and gas together, forming a planetary nebula. And that's the nursery of stars. This is where stars are born and die. So as gravity's pulling all this ISM together, forming this planetary nebula, the star then compresses down, and all this gas and clumps of rock come together, forming a protostar. Then our stars, like the sun, enter the main sequence of the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram. And then from there, all of these stars are going to expand and turn into a red giant. Stars that are about the size of the sun, or 8 times less mass than the sun, that envelope's going to be released off of the star, and then it's going to turn into a white dwarf and eventually go back into being interstellar matter and a planetary nebula. Then for stars that are 8 times the mass of the sun, the envelope's going to expand, and then all those rock and debris is going to hit back off of the core, forming a supernova, creating a neutron star. And then for stars that are 20 times the mass of the sun, they'll collapse in on themselves, creating a black hole, such as what we see at the center of our galaxy.
Despite the massive scale of our universe, even the smallest thing within that has a great impact on the smallest creatures on Earth. The sun provides light for photosynthesis, the stars provide navigation for humans but also animals who are migrating, the moon provides gravitational pull for our tides.
And it all works together to sustain life here on Earth.